Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I'm going to answer a question I had in the comments, and that question is, why do you read trash? So I probably slightly misframed the question in the intro there. But yeah, this is a question I had in the comments to one of my wrap-up videos. And I figured if one person has spent the time to ask the question, there's probably at least 10 people who are wondering it. So I thought it was worth talking about. So the question is, why do you continue to read pulpy novels from the 70s and 80s that were clearly marketed to men, only to repeatedly bemoan the portrayal treatment of women therein? Personally, I don't agree with the politics that Stephen King often interjects into his writing. Guess who I don't read? So I thought that was a reasonable question, and as I say, I think perhaps a question that's going to other people as well. So I did answer it in the comments. I try to answer all the comments that I get on my videos, but I thought I'd spend a bit of time just to talk about, I guess, my philosophy of reading as well. And my philosophy of reading, as people probably know, is if you've watched the channel for any length of time, is I read books I think I'm going to enjoy. And I know that I enjoy pulpy, trashy, horror novels and men's adventure novels from the 60s, 70s and 80s. But I also know that going into them, there are likely to be views in those books that I don't agree with. And as I said in the video I did about Richard Lehman's books, for me there's always a balance between how much enjoyment am I getting out of the book versus how much irritation am I feeling with it in terms of politics and things like that. And as long as a book is enjoying me more than it's annoying me, I'll carry on reading it. And the vast majority of books do. I have, I think, quite a high tolerance for bullshit in books, and I'm more than happy to put up with, views that I don't agree with at all, as long as I can still get some enjoyment out of the book, and as long as I am happy that I'm thinking critically about what I'm reading. And I try to do that with everything I read, even stuff that's complete trash. But I think more than that, I'm actually kind of drawn to that kind of book. So I'm one of those people who believes all art is political, whether the creator intended it to be or not. And I think even mass market pulp fiction is political. It's inevitable. Whenever we speak, whenever we communicate, we are in some way getting over our political views, even if we don't intend to. And I find it fascinating, particularly reading popular fiction or watching popular movies from the past, the way that the politics of the time seeps into the books and films, and the obsessions of the time. So I'm strongly of the view that the Gore books, which I've talked about on this channel before by John Norman, which are, I think many people would agree, misogynistic, reflect a sense of anxiety in the male population in the US in like the late 60s and 70s to the rise of feminism. I think that is, that anxiety is something that is well documented, and I think the Gore books are a very explicit expression of it. And what I would say about the Gore books as well is I think that they draw on themes which were implicit in kind of fantasy and adventure fiction long before they were written, but make them more explicit. So I've just finished the second of the Edgar Rice Burroughs Barsoom books, The Gods of Mars, and that has female slaves in it who are happy to be slaves to their male masters because it gives them protection. And that book was written 50 plus years before the Gore books, but and it certainly doesn't make as much of that fact as the Gore books do. But I think it's a theme that's been there, there's always been there in kind of pulp fantasy adventure fiction, and John Norman just made a much bigger deal out of it. So I think I've answered the first part of the question, which is why do you read these books? So I read them because I enjoy them. I enjoy them as light entertainment, but I also enjoy them as an artifact of the time that they were written in. I find that fascinating, and I think it's also interesting. So people say if a book is racist or whatever, people say, oh, it's of its time, and I think there's I'm not sure that's always an argument that absolves a book of being racist or sexist or whatever, but I think it can be a reasonable thing to say about a book, with one caveat, and that caveat is I still think you should call it out. So I think I consider myself to be a reviewer. Yeah, so I do this channel to talk about books, and to give my opinions on books, and I would not be being true to myself, or I think fair to my audience, if I didn't say that a book was racist if I thought it was racist. So that for me is part of what being a reviewer is all about. So I will give my honest opinions on books that I have read. On whether I find them gripping, whether I thought they were well written, whether I thought the author showed good imagination, what the pacing was like, what the characters were like. But I'll also talk about politics, because I think the politics is a massively important part of any work of art, and I certainly wouldn't want someone to watch one of my videos where I talk about the Gore books and go away thinking, well, if they sound like fun books, I'll read them, and then find out what they're really like and be mortally offended by them. So I think it's important to be honest about stuff like that, and taking that wider, I believe in trigger warnings and things like that as well. It's not something I particularly do on my channel, but in the written reviews that I do, I always include trigger warnings, because I think it's fair to the reader to give people fair warning of things that might upset them in a book, and that's what I'm doing when I talk about the politics of these books as well. And I guess talking about politics, so it's probably fair to say that I am on the left of the political spectrum, both socially and economically, which is probably different from the intended audience of the kind of men's adventure stuff that I read. So maybe I'm reading it with a slightly different eye than the author intended, but I think as far as I'm concerned, once a book's out there, it's there to be read by whoever wants to read it and whoever gets enjoyment from it, and I certainly get enjoyment from those books. And despite that, and hopefully this is clear to anyone who's watched any of my videos, I'll read anything, and I would never not read a book just because somebody said it was racist or sexist or whatever. I read books I want to read, and I don't believe that kind of thing should be a barrier to people reading books and enjoying books, as long as we think critically about the books that we're reading, and as long as you don't read things and just absorb the views of the author with no thought of your own. And I think that about books that are politically on the left of the spectrum as much as books that are on the right of the spectrum politically. And I totally take the point about Stephen King, and I can understand why. I think his politics can be a bit in your face sometimes and a bit unsubtle, and I can see why that would be off-putting to some people. But hey, a commenter, you'll do the right thing. If you don't like him, don't read him. I personally do like him, but I broadly agree with his politics. But I think he, as I say, I think he can be a bit heavy-handed with it, and I get why that would be a turn-off. So yeah, a slightly different video today than usual. Politics is always a difficult subject to talk about, and potentially a controversial one. I've tried to not get too political in this, but as I say, I tend to keep politics out of my videos, but I felt it was worth doing this one just in response to that comment, just to answer the unasked question that may be out there in other people's minds. And as I say, I will keep reading the books that I enjoy reading, and I will keep talking about all aspects of them, because that's just the way I do my reviews. That's just the way I think about books, and all I'm doing really on this channel is talking about what I think about books. So yeah, hope everyone's safe and well anyway. Take care, and I will speak to you again soon. Cheerio.